Well, good afternoon, everyone. On this rainy, windy day, the eve before Christmas. If you're ever, well, I know you have, you've seen pictures of other nations, and you can see how they live, and you can see the suffering that they go through, especially in India. There's millions and millions of people around this world that are suffering. They live in squalor, they live in poverty, and they live in disease. I know in Africa, AIDS runs rampant in Africa because, like Mr. Trent said, they just jump in bed with anybody, they don't care. So we know, as members of the Church of God, we understand why this world is suffering, don't we? We understand that this is a result of breaking and living outside the bounds of God's law. That's just that plain and simple. I don't know why homosexuals can't understand what they do is wrong when they don't practice, they do it. And they come down with age, that already tell you something. What I'm doing is wrong. You know. Same thing with the STDs. What I'm doing is wrong. It's like you've robbed the bank. What I'm doing is wrong. They know they're doing what is wrong, but they don't care. But as members of the Church of God, we know why this has all happened. It's just a natural result, as I said, of breaking God's commandments. So this present evil world, as the Apostle Paul put it, has gone contrary to God's law. And by doing so, it has brought on itself the misery that this world we see now around us is taking place. You and I know the answer to this, don't we? We know how we can't stop it, but God knows the answer, and He will stop it. And for it's us, members of the Church of God, it's easy to understand what they're going through and why they're doing this. But here's the problem. It's difficult when the suffering happens to you. Now what? You're a part of the Church of God. You tithe, you keep the Sabbath, you keep the holy days, and yet these bad things happen to you. Why does good people suffer? Why is that? Why is all this going on? You've been trying and trying and trying to overcome, and you live a righteous life. You keep God's law the best you can. You serve God with your whole heart as best as you can, and you suffer. You suffer. Why is that? And what is the answer to that? How do you solve something like that? I don't know if I can answer that question today or not. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Whether I can answer them, I will try and figure out what is going on. So it's really hard to explain why good people, those who sincerely trying to obey God, have to suffer. Why do they have to suffer? They do. Now here is a paradox. Why do the unrighteous prosper? Why do they do that? Why do people prosper who do not pay tithes? Why do they do that? Why do some of them live in abundance, luxury, and ease? They do, folks. It's there. My next door neighbor is a point in view. He doesn't tithe, as far as I know he doesn't. I know he doesn't keep the law. When he first moved next to me, he moved in a little ranky, little old trailer. He now owns 3 homes, and he built his daughter a home right in front of him. He owns 2 or 3 cars, a Jeep, motorcycle, a bunch of those 4-wheelers. I mean, Gail and I said, how does he do this? He doesn't work. He got hurt in the coal mine, so he draws some kind of a pension. But he doesn't work. And I look at him. And she and I go through all kinds of problems, seems like. But he doesn't. And it's the way it all around us. It seems like it's all around us that way. Since they don't pay any tithes, you probably know this here in Tennessee, or in Knoxville especially, and they're able to send their children to private schools. I think it costs about $10,000 a semester to send people to West, something like that, or more. Private schools, and they become successful in the world. Why? That's the big question. Why? Why is that possible? How in the world can that be possible, folks? You're trying to do your very best to obey God, and yet, from time to time, things are going to happen to you. you're going to suffer. Why do some of God's people who pay their tithes, have to struggle just to make ends meet? I think we all know what that's about. It's a struggle, is it not? Just to make ends meet. And here you are, a member of the Church of God, and your Father owns everything, and you're struggling. I'm talking about God, your Father owns everything. He owns it all. And you're his child, and you're struggling just to make ends meet. Why? Is there a purpose for this suffering? If so, what is it? It's a lot of questions, isn't it? Hope I can answer some of them. What must be proved by this? Will we gain anything if we endure this suffering? Mr. Trent said, what you sow is what you're going to reap, either good or bad. And there's a price to pay. Let's just see if we can find out why bad things happen to good people. This is an enigma, is it not? Try to answer these questions. I've answered that. I've asked myself that question. It's hard to explain to people outside the Church of God. So there are three basic reasons why people suffer. First, the most prevalent reason, it's our own mistakes. I remember working up in Moorhead, and so what were we doing there? We were working in this substation, and we were going to tear some pillars down that the steel sits on, and so had to refix that stuff. And those pillars are 4 feet wide and 4 feet deep, so it's a lot of concrete, a lot of steel in there, because it holds up a lot of weight. And I was using a 90-pound jackhammer on top of that thing. And I have to wear gloves because it acts like shock absorbers on the jackhammers. It'll just jar you to pieces. And also, it gets a little hot. That thing slipped out of my hand, 90 pounds, and drew my hand down on top of that 3 1/4-inch anchor bolt. If I did not have that glove on my hand, it would have ripped my hand right off, my finger right off. But that hurt. That hurt. It was my mistake. I shouldn't have got so close to the edge. I caused it. And so my boss came over and drilled a hole in my finger to get the blood out so the pain will go away. Now that's a little bit suffering there, but it was my mistake. I caused it. So that's one of the basic reasons is we cause our own mistakes. So all that pain I had to endure, I lost my fingernail. Besides that little hole just kept getting bigger and bigger and rotting away. So sometimes our actions bring our own suffering to our own self. The second reason for suffering is the actions of other people. Other people can do that to you, bring pain and suffering to you. They can do that. And other people love to cause you to suffer. I was watching a tidbit last night of this convicted killer. There's interviewing him. He's already in jail. He said, I just wanted to go out and kill somebody. That's all he wanted to do. I don't know how many people he killed. He caused a lot of suffering to that person's family. Another person did it. He enjoyed killing people. He enjoyed watching the life drain out of them as he stabbed them to death. And people love to do that. So, here you are, a member of the Church of God. You feel fine, right? You feel fine. What happens when your child or your grandchild becomes sick? How do you feel now? How do you feel now? It brings mental suffering to us, doesn't it? It does. Thus, other sins can bring suffering to us. There's all different types of suffering, physical and mental. And you don't want to see your child or your grandchild suffer. No, there's no fun in that. So it's a mental challenge. It's a mental suffering that we go through. The third reason that we suffer is a little understood by most. It's the least prevalent reason. And it's the reason that Job suffered. Can you think of any man that suffered more than Job other than Christ? In order to understand this reason, we must look to the Bible for the answers of why people suffer. Why they suffer. This is one of the biggest reasons why good people, sincere people, run into serious problems. You know, people just maybe just go over and scan over Job, but there's a reason that is in the Bible, especially for the Church of God, to read what is going on here, what is really happening to Job, and why it was happening to Job, and why he was going through all of this. So we need to understand, and in understanding we will receive encouragement to strengthen, to meet the trials that we're going to go through, and to face the future. And make no mistake about it, we're going to face it. The future is just around, it may be closer than we can realize, folks, with Mr. Trump as the president, and how the world hates him, how half of the country, or I don't know if it's half the country, but we are divided, hates him. I listen to NPR coming over here, they have a little quiz thing on there, and they're constantly making fun of him, ridicule him. But we're going to face these things. So the best place to start to understand what we're going to face is the book of Job. Not going to go through all of that. But let's turn over there to Job, the first chapter. And we see that he says that Job was a perfect and upright, and that one that feared God and shunned evil. Job 1, verse 1. So what do we see from this verse here? What do we see from Job? What did I just read to you? We know from this verse here that Job was a commandment keeper. He was a commandment keeper then. He feared God. And what does the word feared mean? Psalms 111, verse 10. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding are all those that do his commandments. So he was a commandment keeper. He tried his best to serve God the way he could, the best he knew how. And he was about to run into something that he had never faced before. And he faced it. So we know what type of person he was. He wasn't an evil person. He didn't go around trying to take advantage of other people, hurt other people, or anything like that. He tried his best to serve God, just like you and I are trying to do. So the words perfect and upright should be translated upright and righteous. He wasn't perfect. The only person who was ever perfect was Jesus Christ. So it means upright and righteous. He was a righteous person. It means he was a commandment keeper. He kept the laws of God. And yet, we read the book of Job and we see how terrible this man suffered. God's own account says that Job was a man who was sincerely trying to overcome. God himself brought that up. He feared God, and he shunned evil, God said about Job. In other words, he was not a perfect man, as Jesus Christ was. He was a man sincerely trying to obey God. Just as plain and simple as that. He had a large family. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He was a rich man. He had it all. His assets totaled 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 oxen, and 500 she-donkeys. He had it all. He was very rich. God says of Job in Job, the 3rd verse there, he was the greatest of all men in the East. A great man. But he was in for a shock of his life. He had no idea what was coming his way. This man was so serious that he made burnt offerings for his children lest they sinned. Who would do that? That's how righteous in his eyes he was. He was afraid for his own children. They were sinning, so he made burnt offerings to God. So when you read just what I read there, just those few verses, that's all you have to read. You can understand what type of person Job was. He was a good person, was he? He was honest, straightforward, upright, obeyed God's laws, and tried to serve God to the best of his abilities. That's what he was. He was hardworking. He did everything he could to please God. Now, from verse 6 to verse 12, in Job 1 there, this account was hidden from Job. He had no idea this conversation was taking place. He was not privileged to view this account. He had nothing. He knew nothing about it. He had no knowledge, particularly at this time, what was going on in heaven. Verse 6 and 8, Job 1 there. He says, now there was a day when the sons of God, of his angels, came to present themselves before God, and Satan, God's adversary, came also among them. And God said unto Satan, whence comest thou? And then Satan answered God and said, from going to and fro in the earth and from walking up and down in it. And God said to Satan, he brought it up to Satan. Satan didn't bring it up to him. He brought it up to him, to God. Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth? Can you believe that? Just one man. None else is like him, just one. There is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, or a righteous man, one that fears God and shuns evil. So we can see from here that Job was an outstanding man. Just about all the rest of the world was under the sway of Satan, but him. But him. Most went Satan's way anyhow. Most of them did. Job, like you and me and those who are watching this who are part of the Church of God, today we stick out like a sore thumb amongst the people around us. And Job stuck out like a sore thumb there amongst the people around him. God wanted Satan to know that here was one man who was not under Satan's sway. One man, not under his sway. Job wasn't sinless. We know that. Because God said there's none that does right. No, not one. Everyone has sinned. That includes Job. But he tried hard to obey God, but that he did it by his own righteousness. That's what his problem was. So what Job was not privy to understand what was going on in the third heaven, God was going to teach him a lesson that he will never forget. So he was not aware of anything that was about to happen to him. You see, that's not the end of the story. Satan had a comeback. And he said in verse 9, so then Satan answered God and said, does God serve you for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he has on every side? Have you blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land? You understand what Satan was saying to God. He's making an accusation here against Job. So Satan was telling God, you bought him off. You bought him off. Why shouldn't Job serve you? Does God serve you for nothing? Does he serve you for nothing? So he's challenging God here. Challenging God. And you know what Satan is? He's called the accuser of the brethren. So here he was accusing Job of serving God for what he can get from God. All the blessings that went his way, his big family, all the sheep and all the things he had, all the riches he had. And Satan was telling God, have you not given him everything? Have you not protected him on every side, blessed the works of his hand, and made him rich and prosperous? Why shouldn't he serve you? Why shouldn't he do that? Why shouldn't he fear and serve you? The only reason Job serves you, it pays to do so. Now he's telling, we're reading this today. Is that why you serve God? Because it pays to do so. Is that why we pay tithes? Because it pays to do so. Is that why we honor God by keeping his laws? Is it because it pays you to do so? That's what Satan was telling God about Job. It pays him to do so. So here was a challenge to God. Verse 11. He's challenging God. Satan is. Take your hand away from him. and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to his face. Take all that away, Job says, and he will curse you to your face, and he will no longer serve you. So that's what Satan is telling you, telling God about you. The only reason you come to Sabbath service is because it pays you to do so. The only reason you time because it pays you to do so. Is that true? Only you can answer that. I can't answer that. I can only answer for myself. But he was really putting a challenge to God. And God come back and told him, take it all away from him. Take it all. Let's see what happens. That's what he's told about Job. And I said, that's what Satan is talking about you and me. Accusing you and me every day. To understand, well, I'll get to a little later. Now, God does love you and me, you and I, and he wants to bless those who serve him diligently. That's what he's a giver. He's not a taker, he's a giver. He's the God of love. But what about this challenge of Satan? Take all he has away, and he won't serve you anymore. I've had that done to me. I've lost it all. It didn't work. I used to go to services because I had to quit my job with holes in my shoes. Nobody knew that. I had nothing. Took it all away. Had no job to see what I would do, I guess. Now that I look at it, to see what I would do. It didn't work. I stayed faithful and loyal. Used to go to the Feast of Tabernacles in Clearwater, Florida. No, St. Pete, Florida. It was just around $1,000. And we stayed all 8 days and had a great time. So it didn't work. It did not work with me. So if you're God, what would you do? In this case, God met Satan's challenge. Verse 12. All he has is an empire only upon him. Don't put your hand, don't kill him. So Satan went forth for the presence of the Eternal. Here we can see who the boss is, not Satan. It's God Almighty. He is in charge. He told Satan, as far as he can go, and that's as far as you're going to go. You can do this, but no further. So God is in charge, telling Satan what he can do and what he could not do. So at this time, Job had no knowledge of the conversation between God and Satan. He had no knowledge of anything like. He was going about his duties as he would any other day. Now, on this one particular day, Job's children were eating and drinking in the oldest brother's house. And it seemed like from out of nowhere, a messenger came running to Job on this one particular day. He was at ease and probably in a good mood and everything else, and it was probably a beautiful day. And the servant told him Job had lost everything. All the oxen were gone, all the sheep and donkeys, and these are all gone. The camels are all gone. His sons and daughters were dead. What would you do, folks, if that was told to you? What would you do if everything is taken away from you? Everything. I mean everything. And then look at his wife. Why don't you just go ahead and curse him and die, she told him. He had to straighten her out in a hurry. What would you do, folks, when you had everything taken from you? As I said, Job had no knowledge that God had allowed Satan to do this to him. Verse 20 and verse 22. And Job said, the Eternal gave, and the Eternal has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Eternal. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. And I didn't do that when I lost it. I was the head park ranger up there. Gone. In an instant. Gone. Job knew the ultimate responsibility was God's. And what he did, I wrote that down. He didn't ask why. Job didn't ask why. He said, God gave, God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So he didn't know. But you and I know today that Satan accused him. He didn't know that. Accused him of obeying God only for the riches and the blessings that God gave him. He didn't know that, but you do. You do now. And you're watching this. You do now, don't you? So, chapter 2 pops up. We see that Satan again appears before God and the angels, with the angels. Again, it was God who brings up Job. He brings up Job to Satan and says, you took all his possessions away, including the children, and still he holds fast to his integrity. Then Satan said, you move against him. Destroy him without cause. In other words, he's saying, what Satan is saying here to God, you caused me to do this to him, which is a lie. It's a lie. God didn't do that. He just challenged him. Satan challenged God, and God answered the challenge that you do this, and this is as far as you can go. And Job passed the test. But he says, you caused me to do that. You're the ones that did it. But it wasn't true. God wouldn't take Job's possession away because Satan's false accusations against him, that you only serve him because it pays you to do so. He would never have done that. But God does reveal the real reason for this trial that Job had gone through. Even Job stood up underneath this is trial. But he continued to serve God. But how did he serve God? He served God with his own righteousness, not God's. And that was his problem. And that's what God was trying to teach a lesson to Job. He wanted Job in the kingdom of God. He loved Job. And he was helping Job. Only Job didn't realize it. He didn't know that. He didn't know all this was taking place. He didn't know Satan was accusing him to do all these things, that he did all these things for a purpose. He didn't know that. And you probably didn't know it either till today. And it gets a little further than that. But this is what Satan said to God. Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath, he will give for his life. Now think about this, folks. The entire world, just about the entire world, is under the sway of Satan. They follow his way. We know for a fact that half the church has given up and gone that way. That's what Matthew 25 says. So what does that leave left? Those who are serving God. And so we know that material possessions will not faze us if we lose everything like that. So what's next, folks? What is next? I just read it to you. Skin for skin. Put your life on the line, and let's see what happens to you. Is that what in Daniel, the 7th chapter, talks about that? The saints will be persecuted. Revelation 13, the saints are they're going to make war against the saints and overcome them. Daniel, the 10th or 11th chapter, talk about the church of God. It says scattered, but the word is scattered. There's a big difference when you do scatter and what is it? I think I got it backwards there a little bit. But the church is going to be shattered. Skin for skin, folks. It's coming. That's what the seal, I think is the 5th seal is all about. We're going to find out what you're made of, where your loyalty is. That's what's next for those who will not, who you can lose all your physical possessions that you have and you stay faithful to God. I think it's the book of Hebrews that you have not yet resisted sin unto blood, and we have not done that. So that has to be the next thing that's coming to those who remain faithful. It says, Satan comes down to you having great wrath, and woe to the inhabitants of the earth. And he comes after the church, skin for skin. That's the next thing that's going to happen to the church of God this end time. So how's your faith doing? How are you doing? How are you going to hold up when this does happen if you're alive? You're going to find out. And probably sooner than you think. So Satan implied that Job would turn away from God if he had to suffer physically himself. He would curse God, he said, to your face if he lost his life. Well, he told him he couldn't kill him. But what in the world did he do? Was he in pain? You ever had a boil? Just one. It's very painful, isn't it? Very, very painful. He had them all over his body. His wife was telling him to curse God, and his friends come over talking to him, tell him how evil he was, because otherwise this would not have happened to you. That's his friends talking to him that way. And again, God met Satan's challenge. Verse 6, behold, he is in thy hand, but just save his life. Just don't kill him. So we've got to come to understand that God Almighty, he is the one in charge. He gives the commands, but Satan, who is the accuser of the brethren, says this about you and me. We would not serve God. You don't think this is not taking place? This is taking place, folks. We would not serve God if we didn't prosper us, and that any sign of physical punishment, we would leave God's way and turn back to Satan. Is that true? Is that true in your own mind? Now, that's something to think about. He's accusing you. You think he's going to allow you to just walk firmly on this earth and nothing ever happened to you? God's going to allow him to do that. He's going to accuse you of doing certain things, whether it's true or not. And you're going to have to deal with it. I'm going to have to deal with it. How we deal with it will determine where we live forever or die forever. This is very serious. Very serious. You have to understand, folks, Satan hates the sight of you. He cannot stand you. He'll do anything in his world to destroy you. He says, I've been walking to and fro through the earth, looking for those I can destroy. Who are those? He's already got the world. Who's he after? You. The end-time church of God that cannot be deceived. So like I said, half the church is going to miss out on it. For whatever reason. I've never really... Well, I met one deacon in the church, and I asked him to his face, I said, aren't you afraid for turning your back on God like you did? He said, no. We'll find out in the future if he still says no. Satan will say to God, the only reason they tithe is to be blessed. The only reason they obey you is to prosper and for your protection. I remember just before we went to New Orleans, Mr. Trent and Mr. Shelton and I, we all went down there, had a meeting down there in New Orleans, church meeting down there. Just before that happened, this huge wind and rain started. And I went out to look, and there's a big pine tree in my yard. At that time, I was afraid it was going to fall over and maybe hit the next door neighbor's house and do destruction over there, hit my own house. I'm sitting there watching this, and you can't see when, but I saw something. It just went right over my house. It done some damage to the house behind me, to the house in front of me. All the houses around didn't even touch mine. Didn't even touch mine. And I was sitting there, I'm standing there watching this with my own eyes. So I was protected, but it was, did I serve God just so I can be protected? I don't know. At that particular point in time, I didn't know. I don't know. Maybe I did, without knowing it. But do you serve God just so you can be protected? I do not worry about coming and going, about someone doing some damage to me as I'm walking all over. I don't even think nothing about it. Because I know he says, if you keep my commandments, I'll protect you. Either I believe that or I don't. And so I've been protected so far. So Satan may say to God, let them lose their job. I did that. I lost my job. Have heavy financial problems. Mr. Trent knows what I'm going through that. And you will see they will turn from you and become worldly again. Well, that hasn't happened so far. That has not happened to me yet. I hope it won't. I want to say it won't, but you just don't know, do you? You don't know. I haven't been pushed to the limit to see where my loyalty really lies, like the apostles were, like Paul was, like all the prophets of old were. A lot of them are murdered. That's what Jesus Christ, you killed them, you slain them. And all we do is bring you the word from God to tell you how to change your lives, to make your life better. You won't listen. And so they were murdered. I expect somewhere along the line, if I live long enough, this is coming. Because I'm very blunt. I am really blunt about telling the truth. But I lost my job. And these huge problems just come up this year. And it's frustrating. And there's nothing I can do about it. He said, go ahead and afflict his body. And you'll see they will they will run to human beings for healing. Just afflict them. Cause hard punishment to them. Make them sick. Give them all kinds of health problems. See what they do. See if they turn to you. That's what he says. The only reason they trust you is because it pays to do so. They don't really believe your ways. Is that true, folks? Do you really believe God's ways are the best? This is Satan talking to God about you and me. When suffering comes, you'll see they'll give up your ways and turn to me. They'll do that. And we know half the church has done that. Half the church has done that. And this is exactly what Satan might say against you. But is it true? Is it true? What would it take for you to turn away and go away from God's way? How much pressure can you take? I'll tell you, if I went through boot camp, I made that thing. I can make anything. I can't explain just how difficult that was. You have to see it and go through it to understand. But I made it. I made it. We have a great cloud of witnesses in the book of Hebrews who suffered dearly. They went through a lot of trials and persecutions, and their husbands died, killed. And they're going to make it, but they're going to be in the kingdom of God. They could endure it. They can endure the accusations from Satan. And they suffered dearly for it. And once they're come up in the resurrection, folks, once they see that changed body, that glorified body, and that mind changed, full of love and joy and happiness, there won't be nothing. It won't be anything like they went through. They'll forget all about that. But is it worth it? Is it worth it to do it God's way? To endure the suffering we're going to endure? How much is your physical possessions worth it? You can't own it anyhow. You can use it for a while until you die, then somebody else is going to own it. So how much is your physical possessions worth to you? How much is your life worth to you? God says you love me more than you love your own life. Do we do that? Do we do that? Would you tithe if you had financial problems? We do, and we still tithe. Would you trust God for healing, even when suffering was very, very terrible? That's kind of hard to do, isn't it? In other words, do we really know God's way are right and love it with all our hearts? Do we do that? Do we love God's way, the way Jesus Christ said we were to love, with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, every ounce of energy that you have in your body? What is your mind like? Is it spiritual? If it's spiritual, you'll live. If it's carnal, you're going to give in to it. You will leave the church of God if it's carnal. If it's half and half, you'd probably still leave. It is to be overwhelmingly spiritual, have a spiritual mind to cope with the things that are coming, folks. It is coming. Chapter 3 and verse 38 is an account of the discussions between Job and his three friends. I'm not going to go all through that. Now, here's the thing about it now. Now we're going to come to find out why this suffering is. Job's three friends that are like people today assumed that suffering because Job had done something wrong. His friends could not see that character lesson can be learned through suffering and trials. They couldn't see that. They were constantly accusing him of this and that and the other. And he said, no. I uphold my integrity. I do all this. I give to the poor and all this other thing you can read about in there. So after all this yakking back and forth, it was time for God to intervene. And did he ever? God showed Job his error. And he repented bitterly. And he was physically blessed again. But here's what Job asked before he went through all this. And this is in three places in the Bible. It's in Job 21, verse 7, to get really an understanding of all this. Job 21, verse 7 says, why do the wicked live? You ever asked that? Why do they live, God, and become old, live long years in life, and become mighty in power? Just like that guy up in North Korea. I saw a documentary the other day where this Lisa Lee, I think her name is Chinese or Korean, I don't know if she's Oriental. She went in there and had a secret camera and showed all that was going on. Those people were crying and worshiping this man like you have never seen him before in your life. He's our great leader, on and on like that. And they don't know that they're suffering. They don't know that this man, his days are coming to an end. They did the same with I guess the prime, what they call him, the Emperor of Japan during World War II. Hirohito, I think is his name. And all the destruction and mess and misery that man caused, he lived a long life. He died of old age. He should have been put in jail for the atrocities he committed against the Chinese and against the Americans, how they treated the American soldiers. Why do the wicked live? Good question. And Jeremiah asked the same question in Jeremiah the 12th chapter, verse 1. King David also asked the same question. It's in Psalm 73. Psalm 73 and 3 through 7 and 11, verse 11 and 12. David just said this. I was envious of the foolish when I saw their prosperity of the wicked. Do you ever get that way when you see the wicked, how prosperous they get? And they're breaking every law that God has made. So this is the point. Many assume, like Job's old friends did, the righteous are always blessed and never suffer. Never suffer. And we see what we just saw from the Bible, how Job suffered. And he was a righteous man. He was a righteous man. People believe that the wicked ways always suffer. Well, I just read to you, they didn't, did they? They don't. And never receive any good thing. While they live in the finest homes on this earth. They drive the finest cars, eat the finest food, dress in the finest clothes, travel all over the world. They're living a lax of luxury. They're fine. Everything's fine with them. Don't seem to ever get sick. If they do get sick, they got the money to pay for it, pay for the hospital bill. So the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. Doesn't sound right, does it? Should be the opposite way. But there's a reason for this. Ecclesiastes, the 8th chapter, verse 14. Ecclesiastes 8, chapter, verse 14. I'll give you time to turn there. You have to find it. It says, 8 and verse 14, there is a vanity which is done upon the earth, that there may be just men unto whom it happens, and according to the work of the wicked. Again, there be wicked men to whom it happens according to the work of the righteous. And I said, this is also a vanity. And so, in other words, what Solomon is saying here, God is not going to reward everyone immediately for their keeping God's law. Not immediately. What if everyone in the church were become instant millionaires because of tithing? What would you think would happen to you? What do you think would happen to you? How long would it take you to give up and go your own way? If you're become instant millionaires because you tithe to God. He made every one of us that way. Well, you know what would happen. It would overtake our minds, would it not? It would control us. The money would. And soon we're gone. So he's not going to reward everyone immediately because of your tithing and your righteous keeping, law keeping. God first wants you to know that we really believe his way. That's why trials and persecutions and things like this are happening, and they're going to happen in the future. He's going to test us. He's going to try us to know if we really believe him, that a person will remain righteous regardless of the calamities, trials, and hardship that we go through in the church of God. That's a test for us. God has to know. And he's going to put us through this because what he's going to offer us is extremely important to him. He cannot afford to have another Satan in his kingdom, and he will not. He will not. He must know where your mind is, how faithful and loyal and true you are to him, because he's the one that can give life. He's the one that can destroy you. So the Bible tells that Christians must go through a trial of suffering. And this isn't a punishment. It's a test. It's a lesson, like Job had to learn his lesson. Jesus Christ went through it. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and he had to confront the God of this world who's going to accuse him of this, that, and the other. What if he had lost that battle? Well, he didn't lose it. So if Christ was tried, so are we. Did he not say, Peter say, that he set us an example that we should follow him? If you follow him, folks, we know what the world did to him. And the same thing's going to happen to you. Maybe not all of you, but members of the Church of God, whoever they are, God would allow some to, I guess, be safe and protected. But the really strong ones are going to be really tried. 2 Timothy, the 2nd chapter in verse 12. Look what it says. Do you believe this verse? 2 Timothy is what Paul wrote to him. It says, if we suffer, shall we also reign with him? If we deny him, he will deny us. God tells that many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Eternal shall deliver him out of all of them. And it is through much tribulation that you and I enter into the kingdom of God. How do you get around those verses? Why would you want to? And he said, I will deliver you, just to remain faithful and true to me. You may suffer, you may go through some pains and aches and things of this, and some of you may even die, but I'll bring you through it. I'm the giver of life. I'm the life giver. I can bring you back to life if you stay loyal and faithful to me. If you do those things, you'll be in my kingdom, even though you're going through all this. Just think about this. You go through these things that you're going to go through. Now you make it into God's kingdom. Look at the people, folks, that you're going to have to deal with. Carnal-minded people who have been under the sway of Satan, the suffering and misery they've gone through. Now you're there to teach, to instruct them how to live, because you went through the same thing they're going through. Now you can do that. You have the ability to do that because you suffered, just like Christ suffered. And that's not something I want to look forward to, but the end result is a high position in the government of God as a teacher or a king or a priest to teach God's law, to bring utopian paradise to the entire earth, folks. So if we have to suffer a little bit, if we go through some hardships and things of this nature, don't get upset and get all bent out of shape and let all the pressure and the trials and the influence of this world get to you. God is stronger than that. His Holy Spirit is more powerful than that. That's why he gave it to us, so we can endure. That's one of the word patient means, to endure to the very end. Even though all these accusations that Satan's going to make against you, you get through those things. You get through those things. And don't let him do that to you. Don't let him tear you down and kick you out and make you leave the church of God. If you do that, the lake of fire is your answer to that. So here's what you have to do. We have to disprove Satan's accusations. Disprove them. We have to stand firm in the face of persecutions. We must prove that we're faithful to God's commandments. Let him accuse you all he wants to. But don't allow those accusations come true. We must believe God's way in spite of trials and suffering and hardship. We must love his ways and continue in it. God is the greatest Father of all. He watches over us even in trials, hardships, and God wants us to learn to grow and to mature spiritually through all these trials. So the next time Satan accuses you, just prove him wrong.